Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Getting Started with Camtasia webinar. My name is Jason Valad, and I'm an instructional designer and trainer here at TechSmith. Over the next 45 minutes, we're going to go through the basics of getting started with Camtasia, including how to record a project, how to edit, and then how to share that presentation later on. Today, we're going to be using Camtasia 2020 on a PC, but if you're on an older version or using a Mac, that's okay. We'll do our best to call out any differences between the platforms or different versions as well. We also will be conducting a question and answer period, part of the way through the presentation, and then again, some dedicated time at the end. So be sure and post your questions in the Q&A portion of the Zoom webinar interface. That being said, there is a little bit of housekeeping I'd like to go over before we get started today. So now that we've gone through all of that, it's my privilege and pleasure to introduce you to the gentleman who's going to actually walk you through Camtasia today, and that is to introduce Mr. Ryan H. Ryan, good afternoon and welcome.
Hi, Jason. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. So Ryan is an instructional designer here at TechSmith, and he has more than a decade's worth of experience both training on and sharing information about Camtasia. As a matter of fact, if you watch some of our tutorials, he's the voice you'll hear guiding you through different parts of Camtasia. So with no further ado, Ryan, I believe there's a short poll you wanted to get started with to find out a little bit more about our attendees.
All right. That was the last poll question. So I'm going to actually cancel out of the PowerPoint slides, and we're going to now transition over into the presentation. So we're going to, again, this is getting started with Camtasia. So obviously everybody here from the polls, some people are already using Camtasia 2020, but some people are brand new to it. So I'm gonna do my best to kind of walk you through as from a getting started standpoint. I'm gonna go ahead and turn my webcam off because I'm gonna be showing that during the editing. So let me go ahead and turn off video. All right, so when you first launch Camtasia, you open it up, you get prompted with what you see on the screen here, which is the TechSmith Camtasia welcome window. Now, you're going to see what you see on my screen is underneath this recent. These are some recent projects that I've done, and this is kind of a quick little navigation place for you to open up a project if you wanted to continue working on it. But a lot of times when you come in here, you're going to just click on New Project. You can also open up straight into the recorder if you wanted to, but you can also see a couple other options here, as well as some links out to video tutorials, webinars, and our TechSmith Academy. So you will always see this when you launch Camtasia unless you uncheck this box down here at the bottom. You can always access it again from the help menu, but I tend to leave this on just so that when it launches, I can go ahead and click right here on New Project. And when I do that, this is going to launch the Camtasia editor. So with the Camtasia editor, we will talk about this in more depth and detail once we do a recording. But when you come into to Camtasia, this is typically where you start. You can click this record button up at the top if you wanted to go do a screen recording. But I wanted to point out that you can also use Camtasia as just for video editing. You have the option here to import media. So you can import other video clips that you might have, or import videos from your phone or your device, images, audio, different things like that. And you can just build out your video projects here in the editor. So I wanted to mention that because sometimes you don't always have to use the recorder to get content in. We will, though, use the Camtasia recorder to kind of show you that process. So the way to do that is you basically click on this record the screen button up here. And this is going to minimize the Camtasia editor. And so I have multiple monitors right now. So you might see me have to scroll or drag some things over from another monitor. So hopefully that won't be confusing for you guys. And I'm actually going to drag this up here a little bit. So hopefully you can see it a little bit better on the screen. But this is the Camtasia recorder. And the editor is actually still open. It's just minimized down here on my taskbar. And so let's talk a little bit about the recorder, some of the things that you can do with it. So right now the screen, you show that these are X's on everything. So nothing would be recorded right now. So if you click right on the screen, it's going to turn on the screen recording. and you will see this green dotted line that goes around part of my screen. So what that is telling me is anything inside of this record area will be recorded. But I also can click on this drop down menu beside it and I get some different presets. So if I wanted to record my full screen, you can go ahead and click on that. And now it puts that green dotted line around the entire exterior of this monitor. Like I mentioned, I have multiple monitors. You can only record one monitor at a time. So what it allows you to do is you can select whichever monitor you want to be the recording, to do the recording on. There's other options as well from this drop-down menu where you can actually select an area to record. So if you select that option, you're going to see these crosshairs come up. And this allows you to just click and drag and select a set area on your screen. You can also do that for selecting like an application if you wanted to, and so forth. But I'm going to I'm going to click on this and go back to full screen. And we're going to actually do a full screen recording today. All right, so that's your recording of selecting what you want to capture on your screen or what area that you want to capture. Moving to the right, this is where you can actually choose to record webcam. And from this drop-down menu, if you have multiple webcams, I have my built-in webcam in my laptop, but I also have an external webcam. So I'm going to select that one. And it's actually going to bring up a preview, which you should have seen me earlier. But this is a preview of the webcam of what you're going to capture. So this will, one thing I like about the webcam with Camtasia is that you can record this the entire time with your screen recording. And then during the editing, you can control when you want the webcam to be on the screen. So you can use things like animations to move the webcam, resize it, or even hide it entirely. So I love the aspect that where you can actually do like an introduction to your videos and then hide, get yourself out of the way so then you're focusing on the content, okay? For this getting started session today, we're going to go without recording webcam for this one. But if we have time, we can try and demo that a little bit later. But we also have, again, tutorials on our website that will walk you through that aspect as well. Next, to the right of the camera, this is for your audio. So right now, you have this drop-down menu. So if you can choose what device you want to use to record audio. So I selected my microphone. I'm using a Yeti microphone. So I just made that selection. And then what I'm seeing is as I'm talking into my microphone, you should see this little meter here. And it's ranging, you want it to range kind of in the green, maybe up to the yellow. If you drag this up higher to make it louder, you want to stay so that it's out of the red, so to speak, so that it doesn't do any clipping and things like that. But this is really helpful for you to make sure that you are picking up audio before you start recording. And if you're not seeing audio here, then you'll want to check and choose a different microphone, or just to make sure that the microphone is connected correctly to your device. Okay? And the last button here before we hit record is the system audio. So this will actually record any audio that's coming through your speakers. So there's a lot of times if you're recording something and you're playing back a video, or there are sound effects or something like that coming through your speakers, this would allow that to be captured and recording that audio separately from your microphone. Okay? Now, so before I hit that record button, my one tip would be to open up whatever it is that you're going to be recording. And in my case, I'm going to be recording a web browser. So this is actually our TechSmith website. And we're going to try to cover some things here to kind of point you, since this is a getting started session, I'm going to do a tutorial, record a tutorial showing you how to find additional tutorials on our website for Camtasia. So this should be hopefully helpful in the aspect that if there's some of your questions don't get answered today during the session, you'll be able to know where to find additional help on our website. So what I'm going to do is open this up and have this available. I'm going to show you one tip before I hit record. This is something that is just kind of a personal tip. is in your web browser. Right now, I have my Bookmarks bar hidden. If I do Control-Shift-B as in boy or bookmarks, now you see this bookmark folder showing up here. And if I hit record, that's going to be in my recording. So one of the things I like to do is make sure if I do Control-Shift-B, I need to make sure I select my web browser first. Now that's going to hide my bookmark bar. So something to keep in mind is when you are recording your screen, everything that's visible is being recorded. So if there's things that you want to hide, get out of the way, make sure so that they're not distracting in, say, the video that you're creating. Just kind of look for those opportunities to hide those things. All right, so I'm going to click this record button, and it's going to give me a 3-second countdown, and then I'll go right into my recording.
Ryan?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Is it possible to hit you up with some questions before you hit that red record button?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, so there's been a ton of questions that have come in so far. You're sharing a lot of great information. The first thing that people are asking is, this is from Heather. Heather's wondering, since I'm going to be doing screen recordings primarily, do you recommend that I record audio as I do that? Or should I do my audio later after I do the screen recording?
That's an excellent question. And it's, I guess there's a lot of ways to answer that too, in my opinion. I would say if you are just starting off and you are just brand new to recording videos and making them, I would start off with recording your audio and your video at the same time, talking through as you are clicking and doing your recording. I say that if you are somebody that likes to record or write out scripts for your videos, then you can always record your audio separately, either before or after your screen recording, and then bring that audio in and kind of sync it up on your timeline with the recording of your screen. So it's really kind of a personal preference on what your comfort level is. I personally like to record my audio separately, bring that in, do my audio record or my screen recording, and then sync them up on the timeline. Today, I'm going to actually do the audio and the video recording at the same time. So I don't know if I answered your question there, but it's really kind of a personal preference. And the more you practice, I think you'll come to a solution that works best for you.
Great. And then the other question I wanted to ask, and you don't need to go into it, it is, we saw there was an option to lock to an application. It'd be great to just know, is there an advantage or disadvantage to using that? You don't have to do it at this point, just kind of wondering.
Sure. Yeah. So locking to application, what that does is, so if I wanted to record this, say this application would be my web browser, what that's going to do is it now locks. When I selected that, let me expand this again, and you can see lock to application is checked. So what that did was, now if I grab this corner and resize it, it's going to snap the recording area along with my my window. So if I wanted to do a specific dimensions now with it locked, if I said I want to do a 1280 by 720 window recording, it now will lock it to that. If I wanted to do a 1080p video, it now locks that recording to that application. This is, again, this can be extremely helpful so that you're recording at same dimensions and so forth. If this is a little bit, if you're like, I'm not really sure what all that stuff means, then my suggestion would be to just record full screen, and you can launch everything, your window at full screen, and record everything that way. So again, that's a great question. Locked application allows you to lock it to a specific window that you want to capture, and then you can resize those. So hopefully that helped. Hopefully that was helpful.
Great. Appreciate that, Ryan. So there's lots of other questions coming in, but I think you'll cover a lot of them as you go through your recording and editing. So we'll save some towards the end.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thanks for asking those questions. So, all right. So we're going to go ahead and hit record. Like I mentioned, it's going to give me a 3-second countdown. I will also point out, to stop this recording, I'm going to use keyboard shortcuts or hotkeys and I could actually use them to start the recording. On Windows, you can use F9 is the default hotkey to start the recording, pause your recording, and even resume your recording. When you want to stop a recording on Windows, it's F10 is the default hotkey. Now those keys are different on a Mac. If any of you are Mac users, I believe it is Command Shift 2 to start your recording as well as pause it, and then it's Command Option 2 I think it's Command Option 2 for stopping it. But I'm actually going to show you where to find those in this tutorial that I record here. So I'm going to hit record. It's going to give me that 3-second countdown, and then I'm going to get into recording mode here. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this tutorial on where to find tutorials on our TechSmith website. So first thing you want to do is open up your favorite web browser and navigate to techsmith.com. This is the homepage for techsmith.com. At the top, if you hover over the support menu and then click on tutorials, this will take you to our tutorials and training landing page, and it lists all of the different products and services that TechSmith has tutorials for. Since we are focusing on Camtasia today, I'm going to go ahead and click on this Camtasia icon. This is the landing page for the Camtasia tutorials. At the top, you're going to see 10 different tutorials that will cover the basics of Camtasia. Anywhere from recording your screen to doing some basic video editing, all the way across to exporting and sharing. And then it even gets into some more advanced editing on this second row of videos. When you're feeling comfortable with Camtasia and you want to learn more, if you scroll down this page, you're going to see a long list of additional tutorials that are more effect specific or topics that you might want to learn more about. One that I wanted to mention, as I talked earlier, was at the bottom here, we have some PDFs. These list out keyboard shortcuts for Windows and Mac. So if you are a Mac user, if you click on this link, it's going to give you this nice looking PDF that shows you the different recording hotkeys as well as some different common editing hotkeys. So hopefully this was helpful. Thanks for watching, and please reach out if you have more questions. All right, so I just pressed F10 on my keyboard, and now it basically, I'm going to come down here and click on the Snagit editor, and it takes that recording, it stopped it, and brought it right here into my Camtasia editor. So you can see that this recording is now living here in my media bin tab. It's showing up here in the middle, which is, we call this the canvas or sometimes the preview window. And it also puts it down here on track 1 of the timeline. And we'll talk about more of these in depth, but I'm going to actually try and show you kind of a recommended workflow for when you do your recordings in Camtasia. So up here at the top, right in the center, it says Untitled Project. So one of the first things I like to do is save early. Save early, and I'll tell you exactly why to do that. So under the File menu, I'm going to click on Save, and I'm going to navigate. I've already navigated to a folder that I've already opened, but I'm going to name this project TechSmith Camtasia Tutorials. And I can put this right here into this location. But you know what? I forgot to do something. I'm going to make a new folder first. So I'm going to click on New Folder, and I'm actually going to call this one Camtasia Tutorials. And then inside of that folder, that is where I'm going to name this recording or this project that I'm going to be working on. And I'm going to name it Camtasia or TechSmith Camtasia Tutorials. It's going to save it as a TSC proj with extension, which stands for a TechSmith project file. So when I click Save, you'll see this little up at the top. It now changes this project from untitled to whatever I named it. Now, why this is important is I like to save it early because under the Edit menu, Edit Preferences, clear at the bottom of that menu, there are lots of things in here. And on this very first Program tab, there's an Autosave feature. And this is on by default, and it says Enable Autosave every minute. So what I like to do is save that project right away, so then I don't have to worry about clicking on File, Save, every few minutes to make sure I'm saving everything, because it enables this so that it's automatically saving any edits I do every minute throughout the project. Okay, so once I have it saved the first time, I'm good to go, and now I can just focus my attention on editing. So before we get in and start doing some editing, let's talk about some of the main sections here. So the very first one over on the left, I talked about the media bin, and what you would use the media bin for is it's going to show all of your media, whether that's video clips, audio, images, that you're working on and using for this particular project. So as I would import other video or images, maybe they would live here in the media bin. Right below the media bin is the library. So the library comes with some pre-installed icons, intros, lower thirds, and other effects. You can have multiple libraries. So you can see here in my drop down, I have several here that I've customized depending on projects that I'm working on. And then you can customize these how you want. So in the library, we'll actually show you how to put something in the library that you add down here on the timeline in a little bit. I'm not going to go through everything over here on the left-hand side, but there's some cool things. Like if you start using the same effects over and over again, you can actually favorite them so that they will be here, so you don't have to go to the actual menu to find them. They will just show up here in your favorites. We will talk about annotations, which are like callouts, arrows, some fun little sketch motion callouts and things like that. We'll actually demo that here in a minute. Transitions, pretty self-explanatory, can kind of help media kind of comes like fade in and fade out, as well as lots of other options. And we'll also talk about animations here coming up. But you can see there's lots of options over here, a lot more than what we can get into for a getting started session. But that's why we have all of our tutorials, and we have other deeper dive webinars that you're more than welcome to register for as well. So in the media bin, if I wanted to import other media here, I could come down here and click on this plus button, and I could say import media. This is going to open up my a dialog window for me to find the media to import in. A lot of things in Camtasia, there's multiple ways of doing them. So I could also right click in here and say import media. I could also have a folder open and drag and drop the clips over here into the media bin. So it's really kind of a personal preference for you on how to get content and other things to do inside of the editor. All right, to the right, like I mentioned, this is the canvas area, and this is the video clip. I'm gonna actually resize this. I'm gonna drag a corner, and you're gonna see that this highlighted area with this black background here, that's the actual video area that will be produced in the video. So when you saw, if I move this up here, if I were to resize this window like this, it would actually produce it, but it would show this black outline border around the entire thing. So if I move this back up and drag it down, now it is snapped around the entire thing. So the entire video will now show this. You will not see any black borders. So just kind of pointing that out so that when you are bringing other media in, if it is off to the side or whatever like this, then you will not see this part that's highlighted over here that's darkened out. That will not be in the actual video. So just kind of know that when you can actually move things around and so forth inside of the video window. And you might have noticed that this was getting bigger and smaller. I'm actually using my mouse scroll wheel to resize this so that I can see more or less of it. I can also use this drop down up here to resize that window. And I always have this fit button that will fit it inside of that particular area. Over here to the right is our properties panel. So this has, depending on what media is selected, we'll show you some different properties over here. So if I don't have anything selected, if I clicked off of that, it says click an object on the timeline or canvas to show its properties. So if I click on this window now, you're going to see I have the ability to scale it, change the opacity of it if I wanted to make it transparent, rotate it, I can change my audio, as well as scale my mouse slider, or my mouse pointer, which I'm actually going to do that. So on this one, you can see my mouse pointers right here, and it's at 100%. If I actually scale this up and start dragging this, you should be able to see my mouse getting bigger and bigger on the screen. Now, you don't want to go too crazy, but I'm going to move this up to about maybe 125, 150. I can even manually come over here and type in 150, and it will resize that to help maybe make it easier when I'm going and clicking on things. Okay, so the last thing I want to show you is the timeline down here before we get in and do some editing. This is made up of different tracks. Right now, you're only seeing track 1, but as we bring in like an annotation here in a minute, you can have unlimited tracks, and they will layer on top of each other, and you can move media around and so forth. Okay, now, so where do I start with editing? So one of the things I typically do is I go in and I try to clean things up. So if I press the play button up here. Hi everybody, welcome to this tutorial. And you should, hopefully, I did have selected to play audio, so hopefully you heard my voice coming through there.
Yep,
Thanks,
we did.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it. So one of the things, let's say I pause, sometimes I pause a little bit too long at the beginning, so I can easily trim that part out. So this is called the playhead up here, and I can use this little plus button, and I can stretch out my timeline if I want to. And now I can also see, this is my screen recording and my audio. You can see the audio waveform. But maybe I wanted to take off just a second or two from the beginning. I'm going to position my playhead about right here. I'm going to grab this green handle, drag back that green handle to the beginning, and I now have this selected area on my timeline. I can use this little scissors button, or if I like hotkeys, I can do Control X, and that part is now gone. So when I hit play, it now starts talking a little bit sooner because I cut that part out. Now I can use these green and red handles to remove other things in the video. So let's say I messed up and I said something wrong here. I can make a selection. And one other nice thing is with that selected, I can hit play. This is the homepage for TechSmith.com. It will only play that selected area. This is very, very helpful for things like if you say a lot, or just other, I tend to say a lot. So you can maybe just make a selection down here on your audio, play that back to make sure you have exactly what you want before you remove it. If I did hit cut here, this would remove, and it basically slides everything over, and you put this little stitch here. So now that part was never even in the video when I play it back. Now, one of the things that I love about Camtasia is this little undo button. It kind of takes that fear factor away from, do I really want to cut this or do I want to do this? Because I can always hit undo and it comes right back. And I could undo multiple steps. So if I'm like, oh man, I just want to get back to where I was, I could hit undo, undo, undo until I get back to where I want to be. I can also, this is a little tip, is when you make a selection, if you want to deselect this, just double click right on top of this playhead. So when I double mouse click, it basically will snap back and I can, I'm good to go.
Hey, Ryan, I'm sorry to interrupt. You're giving a lot of great information there at the bottom of the screen. It might be something with their interface, but would you be willing to change the size of the editor and maybe slide your screen up just a little bit? Apparently track 1 is being obscured on Zoom for them.
Gotcha. So let me, sorry about that, everybody. Let me see if, all right, I'll move that up a little bit. Hopefully that helped.
We'll give it a shot. Thanks so much.
All right, yep. So hopefully I moved this up from the toolbar, or from the bottom of the monitor. So hopefully you guys can see this a little bit better. Apologies for any issues you couldn't see it earlier. So let's kind of get into, once I've gone through and I've done my trimming and cleaned up different mistakes, I now am going to basically add any zoom and pans or animations and things like that. So there's a part right here when I talk about, and you can see my mouse move, when I talk about opening up your web browser and going to techsmith.com. And then soon after that, I go over here and I click on, or I hover over support, and I go over and click on tutorials. I want to be able to zoom in on that area so that I can see it a little better. So I'm going to pause about right here. It doesn't have to be perfect. And I'm going to come down here to this animations feature, or this menu. And on the Windows side, you're going to see this zoom and pan tab, where if you're a Mac user, you will not see zoom and pan. You'll just see animations, the tab that I'm clicking on now, and you'll be able to do what I'm doing with zoom and pan on the Windows side using the animations. So what I'm going to do is at this point here where I paused it, I want to zoom in on this part of my screen. So all I'm going to do is grab this corner and start dragging it. And you can see that as I'm resizing this rectangle up here, it's also resizing it in the canvas, on my canvas. So now with it right in that location, you're going to see it dropped in this little animation on my track 1 on top of that media. And so if I play this back, when it gets to that beginning of the tail, it's now going to start moving, and it's now going to zoom into that spot. And now you can see my cursor. In a second here, you're going to be able to hover over support, and you're going to see tutorials, so that I can click on that. And let me play that back and see if you guys can see it a little bit better. First thing you want to do is open up your favorite web browser and navigate to techsmith.com. This is the homepage for techsmith.com. At the top, if you hover over the support menu and then click on tutorials.
Looks great, Ryan. Looks great.
Thank you.
Hey, I apologize. I want to interject here because you're showing some information that's causing a slew of the same, if not similar, questions coming in terms of editing the single track that you have there. Mm-hmm. A ton of people, so I can't even list all the names, are asking some semblance of this question. We see that you have your audio and video together on one track. What if I want to edit just the audio, but I don't want to affect the visual on the track at all? That's asked about, I'm going to say 15 times.
Popular question.
Question.
A very good question. So what I did right now is, and I'll answer this, is basically I was zoomed in on my timeline. I'm going to click on this little magnifying glass, and what that does is it shows my entire track now are on visible on the timeline. So the question of, if I do make a cut, if I do make a selection and I cut that out, it's going to cut both the video, what you see, and the audio of what's selected. So in one way, that can be extremely helpful because it will keep everything in line, in sync, if you said the wrong thing while showing something on the screen. If you want to do them separately, then if you right-click on top of this clip, on this screen recording, one of the options in this context menu is separate audio and video. And if you do that, it now puts audio on track 2 and the screen recording on track 1. So now if I wanted to just remove audio but not video, I can make a selection here. With it selected, I could do things like maybe just mute that section. So now that would just be silent, but that video, whatever I was showing, would still be visible. I'll undo that. I could also, if I cut this part out, what I would want to do is click this lock icon for track 1. And now if I cut, it removes it, it moves everything over. But now if you look at the end here, notice that my audio is shorter than my video. So one of the issues that you sometimes come across is if you edit one and not the other, it can get things out of sync later on in the video. So there are things like extending the frame. I could have, let me undo this a couple times. I could have just made a split maybe here and a split here and just left this blank and empty here. So there's workarounds for that. But to the original question of right-clicking, separating audio and video will now put them on separate tracks, and you can drag these around and reposition them and edit them separately. So thank you for bringing that up. I should have mentioned that when we were talking about track 1. Okay. Now let's get back into. I'll leave the audio and video separated like this, just so that you can kind of see how I could still edit along the way here. And I know we're running short on time, so I'm going to show you a couple more effects and then produce out this video. So one of them, so we've zoomed in on the content. Now what it's going to do is it's going to stay zoomed in to this view unless I put another animation and hide or move over. So right here, I want to add a different animation. So I'm going to pause it. And all I'm going to do is come up here and click on this rectangle and drag it over. And I can resize this so that it shows more of the screen. And it adds another animation down here. And so what this is going to do is when it plays back, let me hit the play button and click on tutorials. This will take you to our tutorials and training. Okay, so what I could do if I clicked on it too soon or too late, I could click on this animation and drag and reposition it so that I have it actually click a little bit earlier or later. So those are some things that you can kind of play around with and then play it back and make sure that everything is kind of lined up. Now, if I wanted to a little bit later, like here, maybe I want to go back to full screen, I could come up here and say scale to fit. And now it puts an animation and now I'm back at full screen view, and it would stay there again until I put another animation. There's one other thing I want to show, which is annotations. That sounds a lot like animations, but it's actually annotations, which are like call outs, arrows, and things. So let's say back here, let me actually find a spot. Hover over that, click on tutorials. Let's say right here I want to talk about clicking on the Camtasia button because there's a lot of other buttons here. So when I start scrolling over there, I'm going to bring an arrow on the screen and point to the one that I want. So I'm going to grab underneath this basic style. I'm just going to grab this arrow, drag it onto my screen. You'll see that it came onto track 3 down here. So I can do a lot of things. I can resize this. If I double click on the text and I don't need text, I'm just going to delete that using my keyboard. And I'm going to kind of point, you can rotate it as you can see here, or you can drag it over and reposition it. Let me undo. All right, sorry. So I'm going to point this to Camtasia. All right, so now what's going to happen when I hit play, tutorials for, since we are focusing on Camtasia today, you can see it just kind of popped onto the screen, and then at the end, it's going to just disappear again. So I want it to disappear a little bit earlier than that. So I'm going to drag this edge with I'm going to hover over it, drag it back so that it disappears sooner. But I'm going to use a transition and just do something like a fade in. And I'll drag the fade in transition down on top of this. And I could put it at the beginning, I can put it at the end, or if I drop it in the middle, it'll actually put the transition at the beginning and the end. So now when it plays back, it's going to just kind of come on the screen and then it's going to go away. So callouts are a ton of fun. They basically allow you to help guide the viewer, pointing to things out. You can put text on the screen if you wanted to. You could put speech bubbles. There's a lot of fun ones here. You can even do like a blur call out or a spotlight. So a lot of potential here to play around with some different types of call outs and colors and all kinds of stuff. Like if you didn't like the red color here with it selected, over here under the properties panel, if I click on the call out menu, I can choose a different color for this. One of my favorite things is to use this eyedropper. And let's say I wanted to use this orange color from Nomia, or maybe I wanted to use this color up here from the border. If I just click on it, that's now going to be this new color of this arrow. And if I customize it and I really like this particular call out the way it is, if I right click it on the timeline, one of the options is add to library. So when I do that, I can call this one orange arrow. I can choose which library I want to put it in. I'll just put it in the default and say, okay. I now have this orange arrow that's always going to be in my library. So when I'm doing my next project and I want another arrow, all I need to do, let's see here. I'm going to come down here and point to that. All I need to do is come to my library, drag this down to my timeline, and then reposition this if I wanted it to point to the keyboard shortcuts. So now it's just going to kind of fade in, help guide their eyes, and then when they click on it, it goes away. So I don't have to recreate the colors and so forth. It allows me to add it to my library, and then I can find it for other projects. Now, we're going to get to some other questions, but we'll do that while I actually produce out this video. So let's say you're done. You've finished the video. The last steps so that you can share this with others is to come up to the share menu in the top right corner. This gives you some options for different cloud services. You could send this up to Screencast, Nomia, Vimeo, YouTube. I know some of you mentioned those in the poll questions earlier. And so you have some direct outputs that can send it right into your account that way. Right at the top is a local file option. If you click local file, this is going to launch a production wizard where you can actually choose from this drop down some different settings as well. One of the common ones that we'll typically do is these MP4 only. You'll see these other ones that say MP4 with Smart Player. Those have to do with if you're using some interactive features, like if you put quizzes in your videos or a table of contents or clickable hotspots, things like that. You would need to produce that with the Smart Player. Since this video doesn't have any of those features, I'm going to choose this MP4 only up to a 720p. I'm going to make that selection. I'll click Next. It brings in the same name that I named the project, but I can always change this here if I wanted to. I can navigate and put this in, let me go to my webinars. I'll put it into this folder here. So I have that location and I'll click Finish. And what this is going to do now is render out all the changes I made on the timeline of this video, and it's going to give me an MP4 video. Now, when that's done, if I could share it, I can always go back to the project and make edits and reproduce it. I can produce it as many times as I want. It's not like a one and done, and I no longer have that project. Jason, I'm going to pause for a second. And this is actually finished. Hi, everybody. Welcome to, oops, let me move this over. This is the finished video. It opened up in this tutorial on where to find. I'm going to fast forward this so you can see it zoomed in and then it zoomed out. And then here comes the arrow here in a second right there. So again, that's basically the finished project that I can now share that MP4 out with anybody that I want. Or I could upload it manually to YouTube. So here is that video in that folder. It's an MP4 that I can now put it wherever I want. So questions, Jason? Anything that have come in?
So many, Ryan. But we have about 6 minutes or so that we can cover some questions. So we'll try and hit the ones that are majority. Let me throw you an easy one. People are exploring different parts of the tool ribbon that you were showing. Some of them have accidentally turned on the quiz mark and marker timelines. Can you show them how they turn that on, and more importantly, how they turn it off?
Yes, that's a very common thing that happens. Down here on the timeline, on the left-hand side, there's this little drop-down arrow. And if I click on that, that shows you a marker and quiz track. So what that does is with marker selected, as I move my cursor around, you see this little plus button. If I accidentally click here, it adds a marker. And markers are used for things like a table of contents that you want to build out in your video. But a lot of times this gets in the way when you're doing editing. So if I don't want that, I can undo it. But then this button right here, this show and hide, well, you want to make sure that that's turned off. And now you're not going to accidentally add those markers or quiz parts throughout.
Great. Another question that came in, this one, I'm interpreting it. They've been exploring the selection tool on the playhead, and it looks like they made a selection and somehow the playhead became separated From the red and green handles. Can you show them how to get those back together?
Yeah, so maybe something like this.
Yep.
Where your playhead is now clear over here at 30 seconds, but you made a selection over here. So one of the tips there is if you just double click on top of this playhead, double mouse click, and it will snap the red and green handles back to it. So that happens a lot. But yeah, whenever you make a selection, double click and they'll snap back together.
Yep. Yep. Question came in from Gregory. Really like the inclusion of transitions. He says, is there any guidance on transitions, some sort of rule of thumb, and how often to use the transitions? Do I use different ones in a short span of time? Just general tips and tricks on using transitions in your video.
Yeah, sure. Great question. For me personally, I like to stick to basic. Fade is the one I use probably 95% of the time. There's another one that I use, kind of a gradient wipe that kind of goes across the screen depending on what I'm showing. As you'll see, as you scroll down this, you have about a couple dozen to choose from. My recommendation would be to be consistent throughout your video. My personal opinion is not to use, I'm going to see if I can use every single transition throughout the video. I would stick with a couple and maybe stay consistent throughout. Maybe even just one. But you know what? It kind of depends on what it is that you're showing. You might want something to dissolve in or fade through black. So it's kind of up to you on what looks best. But my suggestion would try to stick with one or two in a particular project.
Gotcha. All right, so this question's coming in from a couple people. Sarah is asking specifically, when you're using the selection tool and you're dragging a selection out, we're noticing that you're grabbing all of the tracks. What if I only want to grab one track or I want to exclude a track? Is there a way to do that?
Yes, great question. This has to do kind of with these lock icons over on the left-hand side. There are 3 icons on each track, and I'll talk about each one. The bottom one on it is the lock. So if I lock that track, you'll see these diagonal lines that go through it. That means that any editing I do on the timeline will not affect that track. So if I drag ahead here and I delete this, it will only delete the tracks that are not locked. The other one would be, this is a magnetic track. So this is if let me do some splits. I'm going to use S on my hotkey and make a split here. And I'm going to come over here and make another split. So let's say I have some gaps in between my clips. If I turn on this magnetic track, it will basically snap everything together on that track. Now, what that means though now is I can't click on this and drag and make space because this magnetic, so I have to actually disable it in order for me to be able to make space in between. And the other one is an eyeball, and it's basically disables the track. So this is helpful for things like if I disable this track, you're no longer going to see that particular media that's on that track. If I'm showing, if I want to get rid of these callouts, I don't want to see them, I can just hide or disable that. So now I can go back and watch this video and it's going to still play. It's just not going to show any callouts on that particular track. So hopefully that kind of helps explain how you can turn things on or off. The main thing though would be to lock a track that you don't want to edit anything on it.
All right, thank you, Ryan. So I think we got time for one more question. Folks, there are a lot of questions coming in talking about webcam and interactivity. We actually have deeper dive webinars, and we'll talk about those here in a second, that you can sign up for those, as well as a plethora of tutorials and videos on our YouTube page as well. Ryan, let's finish with this one. This is a general question. Dennis is asking, I saw where we could turn on and off the webcam in the recorder, but the question I have is there a way with your project here in the editor to incorporate some sort of pre-recorded message on the timeline? So basically, maybe taking existing content and putting it on your timeline or in your project?
Sure. So that could be something that if you have a video in a folder, let me see, or if you have, so let's say if I come over here, oh man, let's check. I don't know if I want to show you guys that one. That's kind of, it's my Zoom background clip, but yeah, I'm going to do it. Let me see here. This is a video. I'm going to drag this in. And so that was another option. Again, I could have right-clicked and said import media. I could have clicked on this, but I just drag and drop this video clip on here. I could also come to my library and use any media out of here to put down on the timeline. I'll come back here and I'll put this, let's say, I don't know, we'll put it right in here. So this is me being kind of funny, walking into my office, and this was my Zoom background where I'm like, oh no, I'm going to back up. So this was playing behind me in all my Zoom meetings. But this is how you basically can layer this on your timeline. And you could, again, I put this right in the middle, but I could have put this anywhere. If I really like this clip, if this is like an introduction, I can right click on it and I can say add it to my library. And I now have that I could have that in my library so that I could bring it down to all of my different videos. If I delete it, let me show you the library real quick. If you had kind of an introduction, so let's say it intros here. If I wanted to bring in, let me just grab one. The spinning computer is always kind of a fun one. So this is kind of the beginning of the video. Hi everybody, welcome to this tutorial on where to find tutorials on our TechSmith website. So first thing you want to do is open up. All right, so while that was playing, you should have heard my audio, but instead of seeing my screen here, I just layered this on top, and I could come over here and change this text to anything. It says TechSmith Camtasia, but maybe I wanted to say TechSmith Camtasia tutorials, if I can spell it. And I could change that. And so now this is going to be my new intro here, TechSmith Camtasia tutorials. So again, there's lots and lots of stuff you can do. That's the fun thing about Camtasia is you could use it for just a basic recording of what I showed you here, or you could get in and really do some pretty cool stuff and where people are like, how did you do that? And you can, it just takes practice and really time to explore all the different things that you can do. So that's my advice is to just start small, make your first video, and then try to learn something new and add to it each project and just explore a little bit more. So any more questions, Jason?
Well, we're actually tons of questions still, Ryan, but we are actually at time. So if you could switch us over to the PowerPoint end deck there. Yep. We just want to say lots of questions that came in. We really appreciate your time. So thank you all for joining us today. Reminder, you will receive the recording usually within a day of the completion of today's webinar. The email that you'll get with that will also include a lot of other assets, link to our tutorials, link to the TechSmith Academy, as well as some assets that are exclusive to this session. Want to reiterate that you are getting a quick 4-question survey as soon as this webinar ends, and those answers that you provide and that feedback that you give us do directly affect what we're doing. That's how we created the deeper dive session. In fact, that's how we switched to Zoom webinar for a better visual experience for everyone. So thank you so much, and thank you, Ryan, for your expertise and sharing, and thanks to our support team back at their respective TechSmith headquarters. We hope you have a wonderful balance to your day. Thanks for joining us.